Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Art Lounge Alley. You guys might have noticed that today is something different. I'm not streaming figure drawing basics. In fact, I'm going to be doing an hour of drawing comics. Today is going to be a shorter stream, unfortunately. I guess it kind of depends on how you see it, but let me just jump into the stream. So why this sudden change? Well, let's just say that it's not 100% yet, but I do need to make the stream shorter for a very specific reason, and I'm gonna get to that in just a minute. I'm gonna make sure chat is up just in case. So yeah, why the sudden change? Well, there's been a big project that landed on my lap. I gotta take care of it. I really gotta put in a lot of time and effort into it. I'm really excited about it. It's actually a very cool project that I'm gonna be enjoying, and it's also gonna be very challenging. So I have to really dedicate a lot of time on this one, considering I got other projects that I also have to work on simultaneously. So I'm gonna be pretty busy, and I'm gonna need this extra time throughout the day to be able to just focus on it 100% and get it done. And then from there, it's just a matter of like, is the project going to continue? And if it does, I'm going to have to make our Lounge Alley a surprise stream. You guys will always see more stuff uploaded on YouTube. I'm going to continue to upload content on YouTube. I'm going to be doing some surprise streams, so things like over the weekend, I might just stream. If this project is going to continue on, it's going to be very sporadic for the stream. So I'm not fully stopping for this project. It's just going to have to be more random than consistent as it is now. So it's kind of good news. It's great news, but at the same time, I really do love streaming. I love doing all these little different kind of streams as well, and I like giving you guys some pointers, examples, talking about all this stuff that's politically related, artistically related, all of it combined, just sharing my ideas, thoughts, and expression, what the Art Lounge Alley is all about. But yeah, this isn't like a final thing. I'm not like saying bye or anything like that. It's just to let you guys know that things are gonna have to hold for a bit, and I'm gonna be making some announcements. And of course, once I work more on this project, I'm gonna start showing you guys this stuff. Really, depending on how strict it is, if they're gonna like require for me to hold off on telling people or showing people any of this stuff until it's fully completed and it's out. So I'm not really sure what the details of it are just yet, and I don't want to jump the gun just yet. Like I said, it's just like in the very early stages of it. So yeah, that's pretty much the news. So today I'm gonna be doing a shorter stream because I gotta continue working on this project. And what better way to do that than by doing a warm-up right here at the Lounge Alley, doing some Conan the Barbarian. Amazing work done by John Buscema. For those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, for those of you who are new, or for those of you who might have missed out me talking about it, well, first of all, if you've never heard of John Buscema and this is your first encounter with his work or hearing about him, I highly encourage you to check out the special stream. I believe it's the very first stream of Drawing Comics, where I introduce you guys to John Buscema. I created a 5-minute short flick talking about him, talking about his early years, as far back as like him being a kid, to him growing up and being a teenager, and his journey to becoming an artist at Marvel, working with Stan Lee. So it's a cool 5-minute flick. I highly encourage you guys to watch it. It's fun, really and I also show you guys examples of his work, some of the most amazing stuff that he's done. Of course, he has a huge body of work, so it's nowhere near to all the stuff that's out there, but I'm going to say it's not the most mainstream things that you'll find. I had to do a little bit of digging. Maybe now it's not as hidden as it was before, but I did some digging. I found some cool drawings, some lost drawings as well, and that's also present, so you guys can really check it out and get yourself familiar with it. So yeah, you could do that by either heading over to YouTube, as I mentioned, and checking out the folder. There's a specific playlist called Special Streams and Moments, where you guys can find all the special streams throughout the Art Lounge Alley. Or you could go to the Twitch channel, head over to the video section, and filter it based on collection, which will do the same thing. It'll open up some folders for you. You can check out what previous streams were like, what the special streams were like, to get more familiar. And you'll find the very first stream of Drawing Comics, where I play that 5-minute short flick. But yeah, just to, I guess, talk about it a little bit more. Again, for those who are just tuning in, who are new to the stream, I really love his work because I think it's like almost the epitome of comics. It has this, well, yeah, it's a biased point of view. I just really like his work. But what I really dig about it is that it's a good combination of two things. It has this like very mature look to it. You know, if you just look at these panels, he's able to capture very realistic figures, expressions, like even looking at her face right here, the body language, how she's walking, but the face expression, even in the tiny little bit of detail there, you could see that there's this like level of sophistication, and he has such a good understanding of anatomy. You know, he has a great understanding of perspective. This might not be the best example of it. It's still great, but there are other ones as well. Let me just get into it. I mean, he has fun panels like this that show the face morphing into a lizard. And just going back, I think this is a perfect example of his use of like camera angles. I always go back to this one. I talked about this one very frequently, but just having to tell the story, you know, of him being revealed. You know, the story is that he's trying to infiltrate the cult leader's meeting, and he had a bone to pick with him, so he dressed up as one of them, but then he was discovered and he was beaten and then crucified on this dying tree. You know, so it's very metaphorical also. I think like it's a dying tree out in the middle of nowhere. He just blasting. There's death that's literally circling around him, waiting for the moment to pick at his body, to only find out that his friend is out in the distance. And just these camera transitions, right? These angles, the bird's eye view, literally showing it. And even within these small panels, you know, and these distant shots, he takes the time to really put in the anatomy. He gets it down right in perspective as well. And they didn't have tools that we do now. They didn't have apps that allowed these things for you to be able to do. Like now you could open up Clip Studio Paint and have this option for you to be able to create a model and create the entire perspective, and then just literally just copy that. So there's like all these tools, perspective lines that are automatically created for you, and you really do that. They were doing everything manually, so they had such a strong understanding, such a strong foundation of perspective and anatomy, that it almost seemed like they didn't need it. I mean, just looking at this stuff, it doesn't seem like he needed that guidance. He understood all that stuff so well. And just the versatility, just the ability to be able to draw all these different things. Like, he didn't just focus on the male figure and making it incredibly muscular. It wasn't just that. As you could see, he takes the time to even draw out the details on the tree itself, and like creating these shadows and giving the tree character, giving the scenes character. He was always drawing. I think that's one of the results of him being so dedicated to his drawing, is that he was just able to do whatever it takes. He makes these beautiful face expressions, very cool face expressions, beautiful body language to say, drama in the scene. In some ways, there's even in these panels right here, this panel just showing in the eyes of the character that there's this like sense of concern and care in a way. So it's present in all that line work, the eyebrows, the way that he drew the eyebrows, that little line right down the middle between the eyebrows to show that it's like furrowing slightly, but not out of anger, but out of concern. So these little things just shows how much of an amazing artist he was, how great he was at drawing comics, how great he was at telling stories, how engaging each panel was. And as I mentioned, like just looking at this one right here, it's in perspective, it's correct. And he took the time to just really make sure everything looks right. He didn't say, oh, it's a small shot, it's out in the distance, it's not really that important. He took time to bring out all that in every single panel. So absolutely fantastic illustrator. Absolutely love his line work. And as I mentioned, he does have this like combination of realism and comic book. So it's like tittering right in between. It's sophisticated enough to pass as more of like adult content, and also still be within the realms of comics. I think it's also really subjective as well, because there's a lot of content out there that isn't drawn realistically, but it's pretty mature. It has a really mature message behind it, or ideas. Or if you take the time to really to analyze it, you'd realize like, yeah, this is really incredible work. Like Gandhi Tarkovsky's Primal, for instance, is absolutely amazing. I thought it was incredible. The cinematography there was amazing. The story, how pretty much for the entire series, there was barely any dialogue. And it was so heavily dependent on illustration to be able to tell the story, to be able to engage the viewer, to bring out some emotion, not only from the characters, but the people watching, the viewers themselves. He was able to do it. So it's really subjective. I really don't know. To be honest, I don't know what that concept is, adult content. I think that all this stuff that's created is created by adults. It's not like it's 12-year-olds sitting there coming up with, let's say, Sesame Street, right? That's also created by adults, and it's catered for children. Obviously, it's catered to educate children and stuff, but it's adults who are making it, so can't really discredit any of that stuff. I think I guess it's more of like a biased point of view coming from somebody who also likes to create and draw and come up with characters and all that stuff. But yeah, I think that's what also makes it good content, is that it might be appealing to children, but it's done in a way by adults that also makes it interesting and engaging for adults. And I think it more so is the case if you have appreciation for art. You know, if you really spend the time to like think about it and realize that this is somebody's mind basically that's able to come up with these concepts and bring them to life, you know. So just that alone, I think, makes it so interesting. I'd say even when it comes to anime, because I think with anime, it's a very specific style, right? It's like when you say anime, everybody knows what it looks like, but even within that, there's still individualistic takes on it. Like there's so many different types of styles within it to be able to do it. So it's almost like, you know, it just shows how limitless creativity is. It's very individualistic. It really speaks of the person or people working on a project, and it's an incredible experience. So I personally don't know what that term really means once you start looking at it through those kind of through that lens. You know, once you start looking at it through this lens of how it really is like somebody's mind manifesting these things and creating these worlds and stories and personalities and characters and all that stuff. So I think a lot of people shy away from it because of certain type of cultures. You know, like, oh, that's not what you talk about. You know, that's not what you talk about when you go out and you do this. You talk about this kind of stuff. You know, this is what men do. This is what women do. Like that sort of cookie cutter sort of culture that tells you gotta only do things this way. And almost deems creativity as childish. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they got stomped on when they were growing up. You know, their parents were, you know, whoever is making these judgments, whoever is creating that sort of atmosphere, like, oh, it's for children or it's not entertaining and they don't really have the interest or whatever else. The thing is just because it's been stomped out. You know, like, you can't enjoy this stuff. You have to be an adult. And yeah, it just kind of does that. So anytime they see it, they start to think in those terms again. And it's kind of sad. I think it's it's pretty sad. And I think that's what kind of makes people bitter in a lot of ways. And why you have people who are older who never pursued these sort of endeavors try to talk their kids out of it, because in some ways I think it also helps them deal with the fact that they didn't have that opportunity. So it's kind of toxic. It's a toxic way of dealing with things, and it's kind of similar to along the lines of like what's going on politically, where they're like student loan debt, you know, like don't forgive that because we had to work our ass off to do it. You know, we had to work our ass off to like pay off our student debt, so it's not fair. You know, one moment when it's appropriate, they start talking about fairness. Other times they say things like, life's not fair, deal with it. You know, but now in this case, they're like, it's not fair that kids who are paying up the ass, like these really high education rates, things that are going to make them better for our society. Like, we're charging them an arm and a leg, literally, and some are not even able to pay it off in their lifetime. It's not fair that that loan is forgiven, especially considering that they didn't even get a chance to take advantage of all the things that they paid for. Meanwhile, we did. So they're arguing that it's not fair, but at the same time, if you want to talk about fair, you paid, whoever it is that's complaining about it, they paid what they got. They got facilities that they were able to use throughout the entire time. Meanwhile, people during the pandemic, students during the pandemic, they weren't able to do it. They had to do things virtually. So facilities weren't open. The whole social interaction, the benefit of actually being in an institution, making connections, interacting with teachers, using other facilities within the school, all those perks out the window. But they still had to pay the full price for it. So if you want to talk about fair, then really include that in your point. But it's really not about that. It's about, again, it's corporations trying to weasel their way out of having to bite the bullet and actually be fair. And they're just manipulating and scamming people like they always do. So again, it's that toxic form of reasoning. Like, if I suffered, you have to suffer. So they're passing down, they're like trickling down their resentment. And like, what kind of a toxic culture is that if everybody continues to do that? I was beaten as a child, I'm gonna beat you, so you know what it's like. It's not fair that it's not fair that you don't get beaten while I did. Like, how insane of a line of reasoning is that, right? Like, imagine if that applied to all these different things. So it really, it's incredibly toxic. It's a really stupid point, and it's pushing things backwards instead of forward. Like, people should be getting quality education instead of what is it, like 888,000 or $888 trillion, not even thousand, $1 trillion towards the military, but they won't spend even like $1 trillion, just $1 trillion. I'm not even talking about 100 trillion out of that, but just $1 trillion out of that to make sure that education is affordable, that it's quality education, so that people growing up don't make terrible mistakes, that they can actually have a progressive society of people who are multicultural, quote unquote race. Skin color is considered to be a race, which it isn't. It's incredibly stupid to think of human beings that way. But anyways, just a progressive society that doesn't have these kind of issues, that could set an example for the rest of the world. Like, hey, look at this country. They're able to live with each other. They're all multicultural. They're all, marrying each other and creating things, innovating things. They have progressive forms of interaction and conversation. Like, why wouldn't that be a great example for the rest of the world? But instead, they're trying to perpetuate it, their childish form of behavior. I had to pay off my debt. You should have to do all that too. And regardless of whether the pandemic wasn't present during the times that I had to do it. But yeah, just, bringing that back around to this idea of, if they got told not to pursue an artistic career, then they need to go and make sure their kids don't either. They're so disheartened that they're going to just pass down that frustration and tell their kids it's pointless to do it. Don't do it. It's a waste. Well, while that's such a awful way to raise somebody, it's instead encourage them like you should have when you were growing up. You should be there and telling them no, we want you to be happy, so we're going to encourage you, we're going to support you if something makes you happy and you're really dedicating your time to it and improving and learning and enjoying yourself, then all for it, you know, as long as it's not at the expense of other people. Will support you. Like, that's the best way to go about it. But instead, they're choosing this really arrogant and self-centered approach and telling their kids, "Oh, it's a waste. You know, don't do that. Don't pursue these things. That's childish, you know, or whatever else." So it's kind of silly that instead of learning from the mistakes of their parents, they repeat the same problems. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent when I really should be sketching things out here, because now I'm beginning to think I drew this a little bit too big. But just to quickly to get back to this, to make sure that it fits in, I'm gonna compare, you know, the distance between objects. So for instance, his face, how close is that to the next figure, which is right here. I want to make sure that it's in your vision. So I'm just gonna do that, you know, how low is the head in comparison to this head right here. So I'm using another object, or another subject rather, to gauge the distance of things, like how low, how high, how far apart. You know, that's once I established this as relatively close to how it is here. And then from there, it's a lot easier, because then I could say, okay, for the background, the distance between, let's say, his shoulder here and where this background begins, like how far apart is that, and kind of eye that, you know. And really, I mean, you could get more technical. You could use a pencil and you could measure it and be like, okay, it's that long. You know, for example, you establish, let's say on this, you're measuring that in comparison to the gap between the shoulder blade and the outer edge of the shoulder. Like, okay, I'm going to measure that and how big that is. Okay, that makes sense. So here, you want to make sure it's the same. So you're going to measure that. That's about right. And the reason you want to do that is because the distance between here might be different than it is for here, because the image is bigger. Now, let's say this is a lot bigger than this. So going off the size here, unless you're doing everything to the T and then bringing it here, isn't going to give you accurate results. You have to do it off of your own image, you know, what you've established, and compare and see. So if here, the size for the shoulder blade, between the shoulder blade and the outer edge, is that long, and it's about the same distance for the for this background line right here, and it should be the same case here. So I'm going to measure that, and then I'm going to see, yep, that's right. What could happen, right, is, let's say I drew this line higher here, and then I measured this distance, and then I brought it up. I'm like, no, it's a lot shorter. This distance is a lot shorter than this. So now I could bring it back down. I hope that kind of helps out, or it explains the process of trying to attain accuracy and how that's important. The scale that you see here is different than what you would see here. That's basically where I'm getting at. But yeah, I guess just circling back around to where all of this stemmed from, this idea of like, what is adult? You know, what's adult way of doing, like, obviously you're not going to play with like one of those like kid toys or something and start talking baby language. That's a little bit out there. could be weird, you know, people might do that. It's weird, but it's harmless, right? It's not like trying to murder people for profits. They're just kind of weird, eccentric. And I would much rather have that around than somebody who wants to murder people, make them miserable or whatever. There's people who are still playing with Legos and they're building amazing structures. You know, so just kind of like, you know, just going back to that. It really depends. You know, like it really depends on what you're doing with it. You know, obviously, if you're not even taking care of yourself, and you've completely regressed to a child, well, that's a problem. But if you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your responsibilities or responsibilities that are necessary towards others, like your kids. You know, if you have kids, if you're taking care of all that, you're actually helping them to be to develop into functioning human beings. And then there's some things I don't see as being harmful. Let them play with Legos, you know, let them keep constructing things or whatever. I don't really see the harm in that. So just kind of challenging this concept of like, you know, what is it considered to be? Oh, that's adult or that's childish or whatever, like. You're obviously not going to read kid stories all day. You know, that's going to get boring because you're capable of understanding and you want more complex scenarios, complex stories. You know, you're able to handle that and come up with interesting ideas. So it really comes down to like complexity and how much you want to challenge yourself with the complexity of it. I think that that's really what marks something as maybe slightly childish, is if you're reading a book, let's say, and it's a children's book and it has like really big letters and simple words, and you just keep reading them, you're going to get bored eventually. You're just going to be like, I want to read something more challenging. I want to read something that has like more complex scenarios and story and character development and feelings and emotions and such. Whereas a kid can't really comprehend that yet. They don't have enough experience or understanding. So I think that's kind of like where the gauge is, I'm going to say. It's not so much the activity, it's like the complexity to the activity itself. Or some people would say like, oh, playing video games, that's childish. But I think it really comes down to like, are they taking care of themselves? Are they developing outside of that? Or is that the only thing that they're doing? You know, so that's really where it comes in at being childish, is the lack of time management, not being able to take care of things and yourself, even support your own self, and you know, create healthy and rewarding experiences for yourself while playing video games. Like, that's possible. There's plenty of people who are making a living off of playing video games. It's just a matter of like, well, when it comes to other things in life, are they able to function? Are they able to do that? So it really comes down to that. If that becomes problematic, So, and I think a lot of times people say like, oh, video games are for kids, or they're bad because of that, because it really people who play them, sometimes they don't have the limit, or they don't know, like, maybe I shouldn't do that all day. Maybe I should go and do laundry because I need to. I should go and buy food because I need to, that sort of thing. That's like when it becomes really problematic. So I guess all of this kind of stems from this idea of like what I was talking about, John Buscema drawing, comics, the idea of like what looks adult, what looks more mature, that sort of thing. Just kind of questioning that in a way, like, what is exactly mature? What is this idea of mature? I think that's an interesting question just to explore, to think about for yourself. Form your own opinion about it. Like, what does that really mean? Is somebody creating, let's say, SpongeBob SquarePants that entertains children, gives them some sort of perspective, sense of humor, is that really childish? Or is that actually being very responsible? Is it shaping the future of these kids by giving them some perspective on things using these characters that they've developed, that in some ways even people who are older can relate to? So is that really childish for them to do that? People who are puppeteers, for example, and they're responsible for Sesame Street characters. Is that childish? Or are they actually helping kids learn and develop and give them some insight and perspective and ways for them to handle all sorts of situations as far as kids situations go? Is that childish, or is that actually really mature and very responsible? Taking on the responsibility to educate the future generation, to make these kids happy. Give them some sort of outer perspective, because some of these kids might have awful parental situations, so they might actually benefit from watching these characters, these scenes, and so on and so forth. So I just kind of challenge that concept, and it's childish. But I guess in some ways, because of complexity, right? The complexity of, let's say, for these scenes, the emotions and face expressions on there, because they could relate more to what an adult looks like, it's more adult. Because, let's say, you're looking at Conan and he doesn't have like googly eyes, that you would see probably more so for like kids, or the face expressions of a kid, for example. They're in some ways that becomes more appealing, right? That becomes more appealing to adults, because they're like, oh, I can relate to this. It looks like me, and the story can relate to like some things that I've experienced. So I think that's really the other part to it. Spent more time getting into detail as opposed to just really sketching everything out. And I'm kind of doing that now. Once I get lost in like an idea, I'm not really as focused on what's going on here on paper. The only other thing that I see that's somewhat problematic is, for instance, when time calls for people to, for instance, now for people to really speak out against corruption and for people to deal with like the hardship of these corrupt realities, is that they're able to do it. So let's say you love playing with Legos all day, or you love creating puppets or something. That's excellent. That's fun. But when I think the only issue comes up with it in the matter of like maturity, or if you're an adult or not, is if you're able to really muster up the courage to deal with all these things and to step up and do the right thing and really demand things to change towards the better, as opposed to what I think happens is they get like really stuck in these like these zones, these comfort zones, and when it comes to it, it becomes too difficult for them to actually step up and start doing these things that require persistence and courageous forms of activism. Standing up to corrupt, immoral, and nasty behavior. Knowing how to navigate those kind of situations. I think that's the only problem with being too stuck in those zones, not actually trying to explore these other things that are going to require for you to be more stern. So I think as long as you could do that, it doesn't matter. Like, do whatever. As I mentioned, it's as long as it's not at the expense of others, as long as you're not completely ignoring your own, these like necessary responsibilities and ability to just like get things done, then whatever. I don't really think it's important to say like, oh, this person shouldn't be drawing or playing video games or doing this sort of style or that sort of style. That's not really the problem. I might go over just a little bit, you know, because today is going to be a shorter stream. I'm only going to be doing this. As I mentioned, I really do have to focus on this project going forward. So I encourage you guys to, if you're enjoying this content, to subscribe, to hit the like and subscribe button. So that way, whenever I do upload content, whenever I go live, you guys will know. Considering that I can't stick to the schedule now of like streaming every day and that it has to be sporadic. But again, I'm not going to jump the gun completely. Here, I think after this project that I'm currently working on, if it actually works the way I hope it does, then I'm gonna have to be less consistent. And I didn't want to leave you guys in the dark. I didn't want to just drop off and start focusing on it without letting you guys know that I'll be back. That the streams are still gonna continue, just at random times. Goal eventually would be to just do this full time, to stream full time. So that's like the long-term goal here. But for now, I got these other things that are going on. Really, it depends, you know, because if I get a bunch of these projects that I really like and I really enjoy, I don't see the problem with just sticking to that as opposed to streaming. But this is just like, you know, even drawing out these two, it just shows the complexity here. You know, that there's just so many so much line work. You know, there's all these like incredibly small details that make up what this image that isn't exactly like hyper realistic, right? You're not seeing this and you're not like thinking hyper realism, but just these fine little details around there make up what it is. I think after sketching out this character here, guys, I'm gonna have to call it a night. kind of reminds me, like this scene sort of reminds me of Dante's Inferno or something. You know, like this is kind of like hell or something, where you got these, maybe it could be even looked at metaphorically, that incredibly ignorant basic people, you know, the ones who think of like survival of the fittest and superior, inferior, and, you know, violence and all that other stuff, like as if though they're the ones who are the demons here because they're killing people, they're dragging them and throwing them in a pit, and, you know, whatever it is, could be looked at that way. I guess next time I'm going to be streaming, you guys are going to see a special intro, because I was supposed to do one tomorrow, but given this scenario, that's going to have to be put off. But the next time I do go live, you guys should expect a special intro, and something actually related to just what I was talking about. It's going to be a cool one. I'm actually really going to enjoy watching it with you guys, so hint hint, something watchable. Well, alright everybody, let me just take a look and see here. Maybe I could do a little bit longer, considering, yeah, who knows where things are going to go. So I'm going to just continue sketching these things for maybe another 10-15 minutes. Kind of curious to know what exactly this pit is. Are they just dumping people in there? Like, what are they creating over here? Bummer. It's a little bit too... I drew this too big. Trying to see here. Yeah, I think this guy is a little too big. This is a perfect lesson as to why you shouldn't go into detail from the get-go. Because you end up having to make adjustments that you can't unless you start all over again. but I am just going to continue sketching things out. Had this not been a stream, I would absolutely erase most of this. And start again. What I really like about this panel is the many different layers to it of perspective. Like, you got people all the way in the background to show the depth of the cave, and just all these different figures and the body language in all of them, and still maintaining this like natural sort of realistic pose about them. Like, especially this guy right here, these two here as well. All these three characters. It's a fun panel. Like, I love the body language to each and every one of them. You know, I also really like how muscles are present over there, and you could see these tiny little details of like the bend of the torso. You know, the line for the spine as well. It's really cool. Really like that about his work. He really, as I mentioned, like, he really takes the time to flesh things out, literally. He doesn't go for shortcuts. It's like, it just shows how much he enjoys drawing. You know, it's pretty evident. You could tell when somebody really enjoys what they're doing because of that effort that's put into it. And with that said, everybody, thanks for tuning in. I will see you in the future. I will be, as I mentioned, I'll be making surprise streams from this point. For those of you who might have missed it, I do have a project that I have to attend to and really dedicate all my time to. It might be just this week. It might be something that I'm only going to be working on this laboriously this week. And then next week, it might all come back to normal. So it really depends on how this project is going to go, but I guess this is just setting you guys up to know what's to come. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Just remember to hit the like and subscribe button. If you subscribe, you'll get a notification when I'm going live. That way you guys don't actually miss it, since there isn't going to be a specific time at this point. And I will see you very soon.